Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus Sources Edition presented by WinBet. This is the BBOC podcast that ties Big J journalism to big bets, and my co-host, the award-winning news-breaking Action Network's own Brett McMurphy. I'm Action Network senior writer Colin Wilson. Listen, let's get into this. You and I have had this conversation for a week. If Alabama and Georgia are going to the playoff, and we know that they are, I cannot see any kind of world where they don't meet in the SEC championship, and then one of them is ranked 1, one is ranked 3, so they won't meet each other till the national championship. By the way, WinBet offering minus 260 on either Georgia or Alabama to win the national title. Who is the de facto third team that's going to represent the SEC in the Sugar Bowl?
Right now, it's your Hogs. It's got to be somebody. I don't think it's going to be Ole Miss. I think A&M has fallen down and can't get up. Florida's got another loss against Georgia. I mean, maybe if Florida wins out and only loses to Georgia, then they could surpass Arkansas. But I really think Arkansas has got a really good shot. They still got a lot of landmines left, but including Alabama. So I would give the slight edge probably to Florida.
Yeah, and the stakes can't be higher for this Ole Miss Arkansas game because, I mean, you have Ole Miss all the way down in the Music City Bowl. And if Ole Miss and you had Arkansas in the Sugar Bowl, right? I mean, just as a guy that goes to these bowl games, there's a big difference between me going to Nashville versus going to New Orleans. So, I mean, this is a really big game this weekend. But, yeah, there's going to be a third SEC slot here that, of course, is going to draw probably a pissed-off Big 12 team, and the spread's going to be the SEC team -9, which where the Big 12 is going to win and pound their chest and see you later, Texas OU. But, that's one. Brett, what was your big takeaway from what, for me, was a really fun Week 5?
Well, I think the biggest thing nationally is Cincinnati now. They got past Indiana. They beat Notre Dame. And so now there's a lot of people chirping that Cincinnati deserves to be in the playoff. Cincinnati deserves to be in the playoff. Look, I see both sides of it. When I do my bowl projections, I'm projecting how the selection committee will vote, how I think they will vote based on how they voted the past 7 years. And I don't think Cincinnati gets in undefeated if they're going head to head against a one-loss team. A Power 5 one-loss team. I wrote down real quickly nine non-SEC teams that could get finished with one loss. And you tell me if you would put Cincinnati in over any of these if they finish with one loss. I'll go through them real quick. Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Iowa, Texas, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Oregon, Arizona State.
I mean, no, none of them. No, I was going to say maybe Oklahoma State. There's still some things I don't believe with the team, but if they're one loss,
that means they beat Oklahoma.
That means they beat Oklahoma.
They split. At worst, they split with Oklahoma and beat Texas.
Yeah, I mean, all of these teams they're going to hop Cincinnati, and it's going to be this whole talk about how they look in the eye and the fact that they won their conference championship and the fact that they beat the biggest dog in their conference, even if it's one of these teams, it's not Oklahoma and Ohio State. And I feel like there's more chaos coming, Brett. I have Oklahoma is not going to sweep this schedule. Ohio State already has a loss. Penn State is still throwing, they're still playing clean football. Of course, Sean Clifford goes up against Iowa. This is a different conversation. This Iowa-Penn State game could not be any bigger this weekend as far as who is in the driver's seat in the Big Ten.
No, I agree. And the other thing is that if you just landed on Earth this season and you knew nothing about the previous 7 years of the playoff, would we feel that strongly about Cincinnati? And I'm saying that because I think Cincinnati is getting so much love because a group of 5 has never made it. Why should that matter about this year's playoff? Because Cincinnati was good last year. What does that have to do with this year's playoff? Oh, by the way, do I have to go get my BYU hat and put that on? At the end of the year, BYU will have played 7 Power 5 schools. That's 5 more than Cincinnati. What if BYU goes undefeated? Does Cincinnati deserve to go in over BYU? I don't necessarily think so. That means BYU had wins over Arizona State, USC, Baylor's in there, a couple others. Yeah, so I think a lot of people that are pushing Cincinnati is because of the frustrations with the 14 playoff and the Group 5 not having a real access to that, instead of just flat out saying, hey, let's just compare the teams. Are you going to put Cincinnati over a 2-loss Alabama or a 2-loss Georgia? No, you're not. The selection committee's not. Now, I think those are the only 2 schools in the country that could lose 2 games and get in over an undefeated Cincinnati team. But if you're comparing them with a 1-loss Power 5 team, that means they would have won their conference championship with only 1 loss. Again, going by what the history of the selection committee, I don't see the Bearcats getting in. Everyone's going to cry how they got screwed, et cetera, et cetera. I think BYU gets screwed more than Cincinnati if BYU runs a table.
Yeah. And I mean, just to mention, sources, we record this on Monday night, and 4 weeks, this podcast is going to take on a different life because we are going to give betting recommendations on what futures you should be hitting for the national title before the college football playoff ranking comes out on Tuesday night. So this pod will be available to you to say, hey, there's a window here to take this team before we know what the committee is going to do. And I love that you put BYU and Cincinnati in a bowl game together in the Fiesta Bowl. You mentioned BYU has beaten 7 Power 5 teams. I think they're going to do it with 7 different quarterbacks. Yeah. But Cincinnati, to me, I said this off air. I think last year's team would be favored by 6.5 points over this year's Cincinnati team. There are things that are missing from the offensive, from explosiveness. There are things that they are allowing on the defensive side of the ball. They're still a quality team. I know they're undefeated. I know it's a lot of the same guys from last year, but they are not playing at the same level that they were last year. You're right. I mean, these are BYU and Cincinnati are 2 different teams than they were last year. And frankly, I don't think Cincinnati is as good as that. Last year, I thought that team deserved to be in the playoff. This one, I expected something bigger out of beating Notre Dame, but maybe that goes back to the fact that I faded Notre Dame, I think, every single week this year. But besides that, I think we're going to get into this in our questions later. The coaching hot seat seems to have simmered down for the Scott Frost of the world. Brian Harsin, even just a month into his tenure, is firing wide receiver coaches. That was a huge win down in Death Valley. We'll get to maybe the coach's hot seat in the sources edition, but now let's roll right into our favorite segment, sources speed round. All right. So this segment, I get to ask Brett as many questions as possible in a 60-second span. If my gambling ears hear something, I get to call a timeout. I think I went a little crazy with the timeouts. I definitely went. I had a college basketball timeout, a couple 30 seconds.
You got a technical for calling too many timeouts.
Hey, listen, Musselman is all over my timeline. His energy just gets me excited. So when I got Coach Musselman in my Twitter timeline, I get a little excited myself. So, all right, Brett, are you ready for questions with sources?
Let's go.
All right. Clock starts now. Let's roll into it. How much trouble is Coach O in down in Baton Rouge? Level of 1 to 10. 10 being you're fired.
7.5.
All right, timeout. So see, I said I would chill out with the timeouts, but I can't. I don't know if he's going to be, if this team cannot fix tackling. They are one-dimensional. If you're dropping 3 and backing 8 on Ole Miss's passing, that's what teams are going to start doing to Max Johnson and this one-dimensional offense. Could he be fired before a 6-6 bowl game?
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the rest of the schedule: Kentucky, Florida, Ole Miss, Bama, Arkansas, A&M. We could be looking at 6-6. And you know what LSU's record is since they won the national title? 15 games. What do you think it is?
Sub 500, right?
8-7.
Yeah. Okay.
But 6-7 against Power 5 opponents. So sub 500 against Power 5. With all that being said, he still is 13-5 against top 10 ranked opponents. But the big criticism of O is what have you done for me lately? What have you done without Joe Burrow?
Yeah.
And it's not good. 6-7 against Power 5 teams. The schedule I just laid out. a quick look at it based on your power ratings, they're going to be an underdog in at least 3 of those games, maybe 4. So he's going to have to pull some upsets there to keep his head above 500. Yeah, it's crazy that a coach could get whacked 2 years after winning the national title, but LSU is a very unique place, and they don't put up with mediocrity, easy for me to say, for long.
Well, Edo is a former USC guy. Let's start the clock back up. Let's start the clock back up.
Now that Urban is quickly taking himself out of the running for any future jobs.
This is exactly where I'm going with our speed round. Back to the questions here. This is a 3-part question. I'm going to make you answer all of these. All right.
Well, now, if you went to journalism school, you never know. You know never to ask two questions in one. So you're going past that and you're asking 3 questions in one. Yeah. So go ahead.
All right. The first 2 could be just a 1-word answer, but after the third one, I am absolutely calling a flag on you. What were the chances of Urban Meyer going to USC after he went 0-1 with the Jags? What were the chances?
It's 50%, but I'm calling a timeout on myself. Again, that depends on what Mike Bone, the USC AD, wants to do. He's not going to share that information with anybody outside his inner circle, but certainly I would think it would probably be 50-50.
Why is Urban stop? Just okay. I know this is like
because he's a great college coach. I'll answer that part. He's won a national title at Florida. He's won a national title at Ohio State. Yes, there has been, casualties along the way and a lot of turmoil and different things, but he wins at the collegiate level.
So why is he making X amount of dollars on the set of Fox sitting next to Matt Leinart and supposedly going to be the next coach at USC after Clay Helton is fired? And is this just a bad judgment and timing, or did you really want to go to the NFL, or did you think USC was never going to fire Clay Helton? Like, why did he just not hang on for the USC job to open up? I mean, was there that big of an itch to get back into coaching that he wanted to try the NFL? Like, I don't understand the timing here, because everybody thought it was a shoo-in he was going to USC. He could have just had another year on Fox. Like, why did he take the Jags job?
I think the main thing, look, I have not had, believe me, I've not had this conversation with Urban, but I think a lot of it for these coaches is its ego. You want to prove that you can win at the highest level. The NFL is the highest level. Some have been successful. Pete Carroll. Others, including the greatest college coach of all time, Nick Saban, have not. Steve Spurrier was not successful. Everyone wants to show what they can do. Cliff Kingsbury, a very average college coach, is having a pretty good run this year with the Cardinals.
This is not a leader of men. This is not somebody that should be at a podium talking about how Trevor Lawrence should play it cool in Las Vegas. So, starting up the questions back up again, what are the chances that he is the USC coach, say, by Christmas?
I'd say 25%.
Ooh, that's way lower than I thought. All right, we're going to visit Urban every week because this thing is done. Who is the Florida State dumpster fire team of the week?
Well, we have to rename it because the Seminoles won against Syracuse, although they did not cover, so they're not a great team. I'm going with Texas A&M. You're paying $9 million for Jimbo, and he's lost his last 2 against Arkansas and Mississippi State, and now you're a 17.5-point dog to Alabama. Give me a break.
Yeah, the window to beat Alabama, I think, is over. That offensive style is not going to get it done in that conference. Things are broken there. The buyout's got to be monstrous, though. I'm not sure if Texas A&M's ready to move on from
Colin, the entire contract is guaranteed. $90 million.
That's more than what Brett Bielema made off of Arkansas when he got let out the door. All right. Wow. I almost have to stop. All right, Brett, this is OU Texas week. This is the Red River Shootout. What is the best or worst food you've ever had?
Easy. Battered, deep fried beer. And I'm taking a timeout on myself.
Oh my gosh.
So you think, hey, I like fried
foods. Was it Lone Star? Was it Lone Star beer? Can you tell me what kind of beer it was?
If it was, you couldn't even tell. The problem is you think, hey, I like fried foods. That sounds good. Hey, I like beer. mix them together, what you get is beer that's capsulized, and then they roll it in dough, deep fry it. And so then basically you're biting into something that's like a oh, what am I trying to think of? Oh, like a hush puppy, except it's got liquid inside. Well, that's great, except it's just been deep fried. So now the beer is not even cold, so it's hot. I couldn't even eat it. I spit it out. It was horrible.
Ooh, and what'd you end up paying for that? Probably $14.
It was several years ago. It was probably about 10.
Yeah, tell me why. I know the Texas State Fair is right there in that part of town, but are they always going to continue to play and where the old Mobile Cotton Bowl was always played, or are they eventually going to move off into Jerry World? Like, is there some sort of contract negotiations? I'm sorry, a contract in place that makes them play in that forum?
Yeah, both schools love having it there. The Texas State Fair, you literally walk out of the stadium and the fair is 20 yards away. It's incredible. Go get a Fletcher's Corny Dog. I highly recommend those. But yeah, both schools like it there. It's pretty almost exactly between the same distance between both campuses. I'm sure Jerry World would love to have OU Texas, but the Cotton Bowl does everything it can to keep that game. One real quick, one of my fondest memories covering that game was they've redone the locker rooms now, but back when I covered it this specific time, Barry Switzer was the coach at OU. Of course, OU won by half 100 or whatever. Well, the locker rooms used to be in the tunnels where the teams came out. Well, right above the tunnel is the Oklahoma band. So after the game's over, you would go to the locker room to talk to Switzer. He comes out of the locker room. He's surrounded 10 deep by reporters, and exactly 5 feet above him is the OU band playing Boomer Sooner for 75 consecutive times. So you could not hear a word Switzer was saying, even if you were 2 inches from his face. So that was fun times. So they've obviously improved that situation after the game.
As a person who's followed his team to the Cotton Bowl many times, I have yet to be there during the state fair. Might have to make a trip down there real quick this weekend. Let's move on to our AP Top 25 versus the Action Network Top 25. So this is a chance where, Brett puts out a column on Sunday morning. Him and I converse late Saturday night. We both have our own rankings. Mine come from an odds maker point of view of how we power rate teams. Brett submits his vote to the AP Top 25. I would like to Brett's AP Top 25 vote is, I believe, light years beyond some of the other writers that are putting in their vote. Not to name any names, some people are putting Oregon still at number 5. Brett, overall, I think we're getting a little bit closer on a lot of our rankings, and that's bound to happen throughout the season. Some of these, I think that we need to have a conversation about. I agree with you putting San Diego State up there. They're getting quality wins. Wake Forest is a team that I definitely think we should talk about. Like 8-1, I think is a great number on them to win the ACC, although it was 150-1 like 2 weeks ago. It seems to me when I look at this AP Top 25 and everybody that voted in it, you were the highest of everybody on NC State. You have them listed at 15th. They came in at 23rd.
Maybe I drank the Wolfpack Kool-Aid a little bit. The big win against Clemson, obviously, but now you do you take that with a grain of salt, because now you see what Clemson did with BC. The one loss was at Mississippi State, which is not necessarily a bad loss, as bad now. Certainly, I think it was a reaction to the Clemson win. They dominated USF. That doesn't really count. But other than that, they have nothing really to show. They beat Louisiana Tech in a flat spot. Yeah, I think we'll find out in the next couple of weeks at BC and at Miami if NC State's a legitimate top 25 team or not. Basically they need to run the table to stay in the top 25 because they have no ranked opponents the rest of the way. So I'm guilty, Your Honor. I probably do have them a little bit higher than I should, but at this point I'm okay with it.
So your Oklahoma State, your Cowboys came in at 12. I believe you had them just a couple spots below that. I think I'm outside the top 30 on these guys. 7 voters. I'm sorry, scratch that, Mitchell. 2 voters had the Pokes as high as 7 in the AP Top 25. So this is a team that can, dictate their own destiny. But Do you think Oklahoma State has a shot, even though the focus this weekend is Texas and Oklahoma?
I do, because they've defensively, with Jim Knowles, defensive coordinator, they've been tremendous. Offensively, it's not the same explosive product that Gundy has had in the past. The Boise State game, look, they won, but they were fortunate for a bad whistle, or they lose that game. Kansas State, they won by 11, but there was a defensive score in there. Baylor, they score late to stretch that game out. So basically, every game, including Tulsa and Missouri State, have been one possession games. I think we'll find out after Oklahoma State's got a bye this week. Then they catch Texas at a great time coming off the OU game. They're at Texas, then they're at Brocktober. I think those two games will determine if Oklahoma State is a legitimate threat for the Big 12 or not.
So I think a really interesting question, as I'm looking at your AP top 25 that you submitted, everybody in the world's got Penn State, Iowa 3-4, deservedly. And whoever wins that game is going to be slotted in at number 3, deservedly. And one of them is going to drop. Now for you, Brett, that would seem like Cincinnati would finally get up into your top 4. But if Oklahoma beats Texas, that's a one that, that's a team that could potentially take that 4 spot. Ohio State still has 1 loss. Oregon has 1 loss. Michigan's undefeated. They're number 6 in your poll. Would you hop Michigan and Oklahoma undefeated next week over Cincinnati into the 4-5 slot? How would you rank Michigan, Oklahoma, and Cincinnati undefeated at this time next week, considering 1, 2, and then the winner of the Penn State Iowa game is your 3rd?
I honestly don't figure that out ahead of time. I mean, for Oklahoma, is Texas and Kansas State, are those 2 wins better than Notre Dame in Indiana? I'm asking you from a power rating aspect.
From a power rating aspect?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
I mean, just off the top of your head, would you say yes or no?
Off the top of my head, Oklahoma's going to have the much more impressive wins, because I know Notre Dame has never had any kind of power rating clout. Neither is Indiana. Indiana's a team we've been down on since the beginning of the year. We knew there was a lot of luck from last season.
So then you look at Michigan. Now they won at Wisconsin. They beat, well, everyone's beating Washington. What if they win at Nebraska by, I don't know, 2 scores? Right. That means they will have beaten Nebraska worse than Oklahoma beat them at home. Does Wisconsin at Nebraska rate higher than at Notre Dame and at Indiana?
Yeah, it does.
It does. Okay. Well, you're answering my question. I mean, I'm not, I don't necessarily, I may keep Cincinnati up there. I may move them up to 4. We'll have to see, but I don't go in with any preconceived that this team wins or loses. That's what I'm going to do. I watch the game Saturday like everybody else, and then fill it out. And you know what? It's my opinion.
Yeah.
I may be wrong.
Well, I think it's just interesting, because I think the AP voters are going to be stuck with this very question, right? If Oklahoma beats Texas and Michigan, stays undefeated, there's 2 brand names that they could hop up into that 4 spot. And then we'll just be 3 weeks away from the college football playoff, the unveiling of the first ranking. So, and of course, I'm just waiting for Ohio State to hop everybody as a 1-loss team just because of the eyeball test. But that'll be coming down the line. Okay, so moving on from that, let's do the Heisman Handicap. So these odds are going to be brought to you via WinBet. Looking at the numbers right now, we knew that the loser of the Ole Miss Alabama game was going to take a hit on their odds in the Heisman. Bryce Young up to +120, Matt Corral down to 3-1. Desmond Ridder, who I've been talking about, I feel like since I plugged this microphone in months ago, is up to 8-1. CJ Stroud sitting at 15-1. He sits out a game, comes back, looks great. It's a Spencer Rattler 15-1 on his way down. Bijan Robinson, we've talked about how a running back isn't going to win this, that Casey Thompson would have the better shot. He's now down to Casey Thompson's 100-1. I don't know why. Sean Clifford's thrown a perfect season so far, 80-1. I don't know why. JT Daniels is not even playing. That I understand is why he's 80-1. To me, again, Casey Thompson at 100-1 is the best value on the board, but CJ Stroud at 15-1, there's so much left for him. Beating Penn State, winning the conference championship. putting up gaudy numbers, which he was already doing before he decided to take a week off. So I think CJ Stroud at 15-1 for me. Long shot, Casey Thompson 100-1. Do you anybody on this list that we're looking at from WinBet kind of triggers your mind that maybe they need a bet?
Well, I know, a couple weeks ago on the podcast, we told our listeners that we recommended taking Bryce Young at plus, I think it was 250, 260, 270, whatever, because you were getting better odds on him than Alabama to win the national title. So I think we're looking really good there. You did bring up a great point about CJ Stroud. So if you believe Ohio State's going to win out, which probably a lot of people do, and there's a big and here, and you believe Georgia can beat Alabama in the SEC title game and make Bryce Young look miserable, CJ Stroud could actually have enough late momentum to jump Bryce Young and win this thing. So if you think those two things are going to happen, I absolutely would recommend a play on CJ Stroud. I myself would not, I'm not doing that. I have Bryce Young. But that would certainly be good. That would be good insurance. Spencer Rattler's been too up and down. I don't see him getting back in it at this point. And I think right now it's Bryce Young's to lose, but I think CJ Stroud's in good position if you think Georgia can beat Alabama in the SEC title game, or even if Alabama stumbles before they get there.
I think it'd be really, I would be so fearful of putting money down on Spencer Rattler, considering the crowd is chanting for the backup quarterback. If you lose a game, you have these NIL deals, and you could just say, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to be in the NFL next year anyways. It doesn't matter how the rest of the season. I would be really scared to get money down on Spencer Rattler. So Stroud is definitely the one who's got my attention from a betting on the Heisman perspective. I feel bad for Jaden Daniels on this list. 100-1, he could go undefeated. They could win the Pac-12, right? There's no way anyone from the West Coast is winning this thing. The game against UCLA was what, at midnight? I mean, no, there's no one on the West Coast winning this thing, right?
No, not this year. No. If Christian McCaffrey couldn't do it, none of these guys are going to do it.
Completely agree. All right, let's roll right into the playoff payoff. These odds are via WinBet. Right now, we got to cover the first prop. Last week, we said that you should be buying Alabama or Georgia to win the national championship minus 190. That number is now minus 260. With a backup quarterback, with Stetson Bennett, a seasoned backup quarterback, a shutout of Arkansas, a completely functional offense that, manhandled a Razorback defense that looked pretty good against a bunch of teams in the top 25. I just can't see a scenario where Georgia and Alabama are A, not meeting in the SEC championship game, which means B, they're going to end up ranked 1 and 3 in the college football playoff, which means C, they're going to be in the national championship game. I think minus 260 is still, I'm going to have to run some numbers. I don't know when you stop buying that number. The field plus 240. So you'd get plus 240 on anybody that you think can beat either of those teams. I don't think those odds are great enough. I don't think I can't name another team. Can you think of another team that could beat Alabama and Georgia right now?
The Alabama and Georgia reserves. I mean, we gave it out last week. Hopefully people got it, because it's only going to go up. And, kind of what we said, what would a 6 or 7 point line translate into as far as the money line? And now your latest projections, you've got Alabama and Georgia 9 or 10 points better than team number 3. Mm-hmm. Is that still less than, what was it, 240?
It's not plus 240.
Yeah.
It's not plus 240.
Yeah. It's certainly not going to go down at all if you want to take a chance. But the thing is that both, barring a major, they're double-digit favorites the rest of the way in the regular season. There is no way this selection committee does not put the SEC runner-up at 12-1 in the college football playoff.
Right.
So if you're betting against those two teams, you have to hope that the loser of that game drops to number 4, so they would play the champion who would be seeded number 1. I don't think they'll drop to 4. I think they'll be 2 or 3.
There's no way. Brett, I know that you've been on, we talked about this on Prior Sources podcast, that you've been a part of like a mock college football playoff committee. And I'm not saying this specific to the SEC. I'm just saying this specific to a conference championship that has implications of who's going to be if a number 1 and 2 team were to face each other, like someday, maybe if Ohio State and some weird way, Iowa or Wisconsin are ranked number 2, and we already know that it's a meaningless game and both teams are going to get in, they're not going to drop the loser of that conference championship game to number 4. They're going to avoid a rematch, correct?
No, actually, they will not avoid a rematch. They will basically, and you're right, I went through the process a couple of times. What you do is you basically, the same way that you power rate all these teams, you go in and you rank these teams based on who you think are the best 4 teams. You're not going in there saying, okay, Alabama and Georgia just played, Iowa and Ohio State or whoever just played, so we can't put them at 1 and 4, or we can't put them at 2 or 3. You say, no, here's my top 4 teams. And if it's a rematch, it's a rematch. And anyone who thinks, well, that you can't lose your last game and get in, you're sadly mistaken, because if they rank them as one of the top 4 teams going into that game, losing to a top 4 team is not going to have you tumbling down the rankings just because you lost to a team that's already in the playoff.
Right. One last thing before we leave this, because I mean, we're looking at the rest of the board. I know this segment, we're supposed to like throw out some betting value in here. Ohio State is 20-1. I think the better bet is CJ Stroud. I think the better bet is CJ Stroud on the Heisman, considering that vote takes place before the playoff is determined, or it really happens right after the conference championship game when they could win the Big Ten. There's no playoff games that go into the Heisman. I think CJ Stroud's a better bet than Ohio State at 20-1. Michigan at 30-1 has a lot to prove. Cincinnati at 40-1. Come on, against Alabama and Georgia. Same thing with Iowa. All right. I mean, it shows you how much respect the odds makers have for Iowa sitting at 50-1. So one last question before we move on from this futures, because our betting recommendation right now is that WinBet still has this Alabama Georgia prop up. That's the play that you should be making, and CJ Stroud probably has the best value on the Heisman number. One thing I want to ask though before we get out of here, it's the team that finishes with the number 1 seed. They're going to get to pick where they go to. So this year it's going to be the Orange Bowl and it's going to be Arlington. Right. And does that team make that decision based on how proximity for their fan base, or field conditions, or I'm going up against team A from this city, it'd be better to get them here? What goes into that decision, say for Nick Saban, if he finishes number 1, or Kirby does, and he has to choose between the Orange Bowl or Arlington?
Yes, exactly everything you said, Colin. Yeah, you look at who your opponent is. Let's say, this is a hypothetical. Let's say the University of Miami was the number 4 seed, Alabama's number 1. You're not going to want to play that game in the Orange Bowl. You're wanting to go play in Arlington. Even if the team was not based in Florida, if you're Alabama and you look at it, well, do we want to go to the Orange Bowl, or would we rather go to Arlington because you can get more fans in the stadium and we're going to have such a huge following? We want it to be as much like an Alabama home game as we can. So we want to play in the bigger facility. We want to go to Arlington. So that's kind of some of the things that come into that. And then keep in mind that the 2 and 3, they have no say in this. Right. Basically the 1 seed says we're going here. Again, they will technically, the college football playoff will assign the teams, but they do know the preference of the number 1 seed. It's more drastic when it's like the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl host it. You've got California and New Orleans. Obviously in that situation, Alabama would want to play in New Orleans, a lot closer than flying all the way across the country to the Rose Bowl. But yeah, you lined out a lot of things that they're thinking about. And the College Football Playoff Selection Committee technically will make that decision, but believe me, they know what the preference of that number 1 seed is. They're not going to send them somewhere they do not want to go.
And the number 1 team, correct me if I'm wrong, they're never going to want to go to the Fiesta Bowl. There's no recruits there to get, right? I mean, Florida and Texas is deep in recruits. The Rose Bowl is deep in recruits. Like they're never going to go to the Fiesta Bowl, right?
Well, the third year, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So obviously not this year. Next year, the semifinals are the Fiesta Bowl and the Peach Bowl. So, if let's say Alabama was the 1 seed and Georgia was the 4 seed, absolutely you're going to go to the Fiesta Bowl. Why
Right.
would you want to play in Atlanta, play Georgia in Atlanta? Unless you felt like you were going to have enough of a following that it wasn't going to impact you.
Right.
So, but yeah, at this point, look, Saban's recruiting 365 days a year anyway. He was on the Manning cast last week. It was great. He just happened to, I just laughed. He casually mentioned when they said, you got so many guys in the NFL, he goes, yeah, I think we have 73. It's like, I think I had a little Debbie's, snack today. Yeah, we have 73 in the NFL. No big deal. So he's always recruiting year round. So I don't think he really cares where the recruits are. They will find Bama on their local device or TV monitor.
Yeah, well, one person he's recruited is my 88-year-old grandmother who called the Bad Beats hotline without my knowledge.
I heard that.
Every year is that Nick Saban married? Yes, Miss Terry is very much live. Oh, well, you let me know if that ever changes. Grandma, it ain't gonna happen. All right.
Well, you tell your grandma that I'm 2-1 going head to head with you and Stuckey with my Bama plays. So I'm ahead right now. You had him last week. I know you had him last week.
She knows. She watched. She was not happy that an Ole Miss was a pick. She was really upset that Ole Miss was a pick on the show. So we'll have to keep the grandma factor in when we make our picks when it comes to the Crimson Tide. Brett, that's going to do it this week. Thanks for joining me. We will be back next week. This has been the Big Bets on Campus Sources Edition. Tomorrow afternoon, you can hear our Red Hot group. Boy, they went crazy last week, too. They had a great call in South Alabama. Our experts, Mike Iannello, Mike Calabrese, our G5 deep dive episode. And then late Thursday, Stuckey and I will be back. We'll return for our Week 6 betting preview, all here on the BBOC. Brett's got to get back to blowing up athletic directors' phones. And I've got to get back to watching this Arkansas number get up to a touchdown against Ole Miss. I don't even know what's going on here. So thank you for joining us. See you at the window.